Tenet is leagues better than Sword Art Online, and calling this a comparison already feels way too generous. One is a movie that actually challenges its audience, demands attention, and expects you to think. The other is an overhyped anime that confuses lazy wish fulfillment with good storytelling. Tenet doesn't pause every 5 minutes to explain itself like you're incapable of following basic cause and effect. It throws you into the deep end and assumes you're smart enough to swim. Sword Art Online does the exact opposite. It explains everything nonstop and still manages to contradict its own rules, forget its own stakes, and trip over its own logic. This isn't about personal taste. This is about effort and ambition. One is dense, complex, and unapologetic about it. The other is shallow, bloated, and carried almost entirely by power fantasy nonsense and flashy visuals. So, if you genuinely think these two are on the same level, this video is going to be uncomfortable for you.
Tenet is great because it actually trusts its concept instead of watering it down. The movie commits fully to inversion as an idea and builds the entire experience around it. The action, the structure, the editing, even the sound design all exist to serve that core mechanic. Nothing is there just to look cool. Everything has a purpose, even when you don't fully understand it yet. The movie also respects the audience enough to let confusion exist. Tenet understands that confusion is part of engagement. You're supposed to feel disoriented at first, because the characters are disoriented. Instead of dumping exposition endlessly, it lets visuals, repetition, and cause and effect do the explaining. Scenes mean more the second time you see them, not because the movie suddenly explains itself, but because you've earned that understanding. The action alone puts most sci-fi to shame. These aren't random CGI explosions thrown together for spectacle. Every fight, chase, and set piece is choreographed around time moving in opposite directions, which is insanely difficult to pull off. You can feel the precision behind it. The movie isn't flashy because it's desperate for attention, it's flashy because it's executing something genuinely new. Tenet also doesn't rely on emotional manipulation shortcuts. There's no constant monologuing about feelings, no melodrama shoved into every scene. The characters are defined by what they do, how they adapt, and how they move through an impossible system. It's cold, deliberate, and controlled, and that's exactly why it works. Most importantly, Tenet has ambition. Real ambition. It would rather fail while attempting something original than succeed by repeating the same tired formulas. It doesn't beg to be liked. It doesn't apologize for being difficult. It exists on its own terms, and that alone already puts it miles ahead of stories that play it safe and call it depth. Tenet isn't just good. It's confident, demanding, and uncompromising, and that's why it actually lasts in your head long after it's over. Christopher Nolan's directing is amazing because he actually directs like someone in full control of every single frame, not like someone hoping the audience will fill in the gaps for sloppy decisions. Nothing in his films feels accidental, and Tenet is one of the clearest examples of that. The movie moves with absolute confidence because Nolan knows exactly what he wants the audience to see, hear, and process at every moment. What separates Christopher Nolan from most directors is scale with intention. He doesn't just make things big for the sake of being loud or flashy. Every massive set piece in Tenet is designed around the core idea of time inversion. The directing isn't about spectacle first, it's about concept first. The visuals exist to communicate rules, consequences, and structure, not just to look impressive in a trailer. Nolan also understands visual storytelling better than most modern filmmakers. He doesn't rely on characters explaining what's happening every 2 seconds. He blocks scenes so that movement, symmetry, and repetition tell the story. When you see events play forward and backward, that's not a gimmick. That's directing discipline. It requires planning, rehearsal, and an insane level of precision that most directors wouldn't even attempt. The pacing is another thing people confuse with flaws, when it's actually control. Nolan doesn't slow down to reassure the audience. He keeps momentum because the momentum is the point. The film feels relentless because time itself is relentless. That's a directing choice, not an accident. He aligns the structure of the movie with the theme, and that's something very few directors pull off successfully. Sound and image are also completely unified under his direction. Dialogue, music, and effects are layered to create tension rather than comfort. Nolan isn't trying to make every line easy to hear in isolation, he's creating an atmosphere where information competes with chaos, just like it does for the characters. That's bold, and it's intentional. Most importantly, Christopher Nolan directs with authority. He doesn't chase trends, he doesn't pander, and he doesn't dilute his ideas to make them safer. He commits fully, even knowing some people will complain. That level of confidence only comes from a director who understands his craft deeply and trusts his audience enough to keep up. This is what real directing looks like. Not hand-holding. Not over-explaining. Just complete command of vision, execution, and theme from start to finish. The acting in Tenet works because it understands the kind of movie it's in and never tries to sabotage it with overacting or cheap emotional bait. This isn't a story about characters stopping to cry or monologue every 5 minutes. It's about people functioning inside a complex system, and the performances reflect that discipline. John David Washington carries the film with restraint and control. His performance isn't loud or showy, and that's exactly the point. He plays someone constantly processing, adapting, and recalibrating in real time. There's intelligence in the way he moves, reacts, and listens. He doesn't need exaggerated emotions to sell tension because his physicality and timing do that work. It feels professional, grounded, and intentional. Robert Pattinson is the perfect counterbalance. He brings charisma and humor without undercutting the seriousness of the story. His performance adds texture without turning the film into a joke. There's confidence in how relaxed he feels within an absurdly complicated narrative, and that ease makes the world feel more believable instead of less. He proves that subtle charm can exist without turning the movie into a self-aware wink at the audience. Elizabeth Debicki gives the most emotionally exposed performance in the film, and it never feels forced. She doesn't oversell vulnerability. Her presence is quiet but heavy, and that restraint makes the stakes feel real. The performance fits Nolan's cold, controlled tone while still adding a human weight that doesn't derail the structure of the movie. Even the villains and supporting roles are handled with seriousness. No one is chewing scenery. No one is acting like they wandered in from a completely different genre. Every performance is calibrated to the same frequency, which is incredibly rare in blockbuster filmmaking. That consistency is why the movie feels cohesive instead of messy. What makes the acting in Tenet strong is that it serves the film instead of demanding attention. The actors trust the material and the direction enough to pull back rather than push. There's no desperation to be likable, relatable, or iconic. The performances exist to move the idea forward, not to generate memes or fan service. That's the difference between acting with purpose and acting for applause. Tenet chooses the former, and it shows in every scene. The action in Tenet is on a completely different level because it isn't just noise and movement, it's design. Every fight, chase, and set piece is built around the rules of the world, not slapped on top of the story as filler. The action exists to prove the concept, not distract from it. What makes it stand out immediately is that the action actually makes you think. You're not just watching punches land or cars crash, you're watching cause and effect break apart and reassemble in real time. Fights aren't about who hits harder, they're about timing, positioning, and understanding how inverted motion changes everything. That alone already puts it ahead of most action movies that rely on brute force spectacle. The choreography is insanely precise. Scenes where characters fight themselves or move against the flow of time require absolute discipline from everyone involved. This isn't random chaos cleaned up in editing. You can tell the action was planned down to the smallest detail, because it has to be. If even one movement is off, the entire illusion collapses. That level of execution is rare, especially at this scale. The practical effects elevate everything even further. Real vehicles, real locations, real stunts. When things explode, flip, or collide, they have weight and consequence. You feel the physical reality behind the action, which makes the time inversion feel more disturbing and impressive instead of cartoonish. It grounds the insanity instead of letting it float away into fake-looking spectacle. The action also respects continuity. Events echo each other forward and backward, and later scenes recontextualize earlier ones. You realize fights weren't just random encounters, they were part of a closed loop. That kind of payoff only works when action is treated as storytelling, not as background noise between dialogue scenes. Most action movies want you to turn your brain off. Tenet demands the opposite. It asks you to stay alert, to notice patterns, to question what you're seeing. The action doesn't exist to give you a dopamine hit and move on. It exists to reinforce the theme, the structure, and the ambition of the film. That's why the action in Tenet actually sticks with you. It's not just exciting in the moment, it's intellectually aggressive. It challenges how action can even function in a movie, and then commits fully to that challenge without backing down. The script of Tenet is great because it actually understands what it's trying to do and never pretends to be something it's not. It isn't written to be comforting, relatable, or easy. It's written like a mechanism. Every line exists to move information, establish rules, or push momentum forward. There is no wasted dialogue, no filler conversations pretending to be depth. What makes the script impressive is its discipline. Tenet doesn't explain its ideas 5 different ways just in case someone wasn't paying attention. It explains something once, sometimes indirectly, and then expects you to remember it. If you miss it, that's on you. The script respects memory, attention, and logic, which is incredibly rare in modern blockbusters. The dialogue is sharp and functional. Characters don't ramble. They don't over-explain their emotions. They speak like professionals dealing with impossible circumstances. Conversations move fast because the world is moving fast. That restraint gives the movie its cold, efficient tone, and the script never breaks that tone for cheap emotional beats or forced humor. The structure of the script is where it really flexes. Scenes are written to mirror, loop, and recontextualize each other. Information given early doesn't feel important until later, and moments that seem confusing suddenly snap into place on reflection. The script is built to reward rewatching, not to dump everything into a single viewing experience. Even the protagonist being literally called the protagonist is a deliberate script choice. It strips away ego and centers the idea over the individual. This isn't a character-driven power fantasy. It's a role inside a system, and the script commits to that concept fully instead of backing out halfway for audience comfort. Most scripts are afraid of being misunderstood, so they overcompensate with exposition and repetition. Tenet does the opposite. It accepts that some people won't like it, won't get it, or won't try. That confidence is baked directly into the writing. The script doesn't beg for approval. It doesn't apologize for complexity. That's why the script of Tenet works. It's tight, intentional, and uncompromising. It treats storytelling like engineering, not therapy, and it proves that a blockbuster script can be smart without being smug and complex without being sloppy. The characters in Tenet exist to function inside a system. They have roles, limits, and consequences. They don't bend the world around themselves just because the story wants them to look cool. When they succeed, it's because they adapt, learn, and take risks. When they fail, the film doesn't magically excuse it. The characters are competent, but never invincible, and that alone already puts them on a higher level. Now compare that to Sword Art Online, where characters exist almost exclusively to orbit one guy. Kirito isn't a character so much as a walking cheat code. He doesn't grow in meaningful ways because he never has to. The world constantly rearranges itself to make sure he's right, powerful, and admired. Problems don't challenge him, they wait politely to be solved by him. That's not character writing, that's self-insert fanfiction with a budget. Tenet doesn't care about making its characters relatable in the shallow anime sense. It makes them believable. They're professionals operating under pressure, not teenagers monologuing about feelings while the plot stalls. They don't stop the story dead so the audience can be reassured that the hero is special. They keep moving, because the mission matters more than their ego. Sword Art Online does the opposite. Characters constantly tell you how amazing Kirito is instead of showing it through earned consequences. Side characters exist to praise him, fall in love with him, or be rescued by him. Villains are either cartoonishly evil or intellectually flimsy, designed less to challenge the protagonist and more to justify another power-up. It's hollow, repetitive, and painfully transparent. Even Tenet's protagonist being deliberately unnamed shows more confidence in its characters than Sword Art Online ever does. He isn't defined by how many girls like him or how unbeatable he is. He's defined by decisions, sacrifice, and timing. His identity is shaped by action, not validation. Sword Art Online mistakes wish fulfillment for depth. Tenet understands that characters don't need to be adored to be effective. They need to be consistent, disciplined, and embedded in the logic of the world. One treats characters like tools for storytelling. The other treats them like trophies for the audience. That's why Tenet's characters feel sharp and purposeful, while Sword Art Online's feel artificial and pandering. One respects intelligence. The other just wants applause. Now let's talk about the story, because this is where Tenet completely humiliates Sword Art Online. Tenet's story is built like a machine. Every event has a cause, every cause has consequences, and those consequences loop back on themselves with brutal consistency. The plot doesn't exist to make the audience feel comfortable or validated. It exists to explore an idea all the way to its logical extreme. Time inversion isn't a gimmick slapped onto a generic spy plot. It is the plot. The entire story bends around it, commits to it, and never cheats to make things easier. Sword Art Online's story, by comparison, is a mess that pretends to be deep by piling concepts on top of each other and never fully committing to any of them. It starts with a genuinely interesting premise, then immediately wastes it. Death in a game is supposed to matter, but the story constantly undercuts its own stakes. Characters survive when they shouldn't, rules change when they're inconvenient, and tension evaporates the moment the protagonist walks into a scene. Tenet actually respects its own rules. Once something is established, the story sticks to it, even when it makes things harder to understand. Especially then. The plot doesn't magically bail itself out with last-minute exceptions. If something happens, it happened because it had to. That sense of inevitability gives the story weight. You feel like you're watching a closed system, not a writer scrambling to keep things exciting. Sword Art Online has no such discipline. Its story runs on convenience. Conflicts exist just long enough to be solved by Kirito being better than everyone else. Villains show up, explain their twisted motivations, and get wiped out without fundamentally changing anything. Entire arcs feel like filler because nothing truly alters the world or the characters in a lasting way. The story moves forward, but it never deepens. Tenet also understands restraint. It doesn't explain every theme out loud or spoon-feed you emotional conclusions. It trusts structure, repetition, and implication to do the work. You're expected to engage, remember, and connect dots. Sword Art Online does the opposite. It constantly tells you what to feel, who to root for, and why something is important, usually right after showing you the exact opposite through its own inconsistencies. Most importantly, Tenet's story has ambition and follow-through. It dares to be confusing, demanding, and unapologetic because it knows the payoff is intellectual, not emotional pandering. Sword Art Online wants to feel epic without earning it. It wants depth without discipline. It wants stakes without consequences. One story is engineered. The other is improvised and padded. Tenet challenges its audience and stands by its choices. Sword Art Online plays it safe, then pretends that safety is sophistication. That's why Tenet's story actually lasts, while Sword Art Online collapses the moment you stop giving it the benefit of the doubt. Now let's talk about the action, because this is where the difference between Tenet and Sword Art Online becomes almost insulting. Tenet's action is built from logic first and spectacle second. Every fight, chase, and explosion exists because of the story's rules, not because the audience needs to be entertained every 30 seconds. The action forces you to pay attention. You're not just watching things happen, you're actively processing why they're happening, how they're happening, and what they mean in the larger structure of the film. Sword Art Online's action, by contrast, is brainless power fantasy filler. It looks flashy, sure, but it's empty. Fights aren't strategic, they're inevitable. You already know who's going to win the moment Kirito shows up, because the show has trained you to expect zero resistance and zero consequences. There's no tension when victory is guaranteed and no creativity when the solution is always, the protagonist is stronger than everyone else. In Tenet, action scenes are puzzles. You see something happen, then later you understand it, then later still you realize it was even more complex than you thought. A single fight can completely change meaning depending on when and how you view it. That's not accidental. That's action used as storytelling. The movie trusts the audience to keep up and rewards them for doing so. Sword Art Online doesn't trust its audience at all. Its action exists to make the main character look cool, not to explore ideas or reinforce rules. Characters swing swords, shout attack names, and magically overpower enemies with no real cost. Damage barely matters. Death barely matters. Strategy barely matters. It's visual noise pretending to be intensity. Tenet also understands physicality. The action has weight. You feel momentum, resistance, timing. When something goes wrong, it feels dangerous because the film has earned that danger through consistency. Sword Art Online's action floats in a consequence-free void. Characters get stabbed, crushed, or overwhelmed, and it rarely changes anything long-term. The action resets after every fight like nothing mattered. Most action anime wants you to turn your brain off and cheer. Tenet demands the opposite. It challenges your perception of cause and effect and makes you question what you're seeing in real time. One treats action as a thinking exercise. The other treats it as a highlight reel. That's why Tenet's action is memorable and Sword Art Online's action is disposable. One pushes the medium forward. The other just repeats. The same empty power fantasy until the visuals wear off and there's nothing left underneath. Now let's talk about directing, because this is where Tenet completely exposes how shallow Sword Art Online really is. Christopher Nolan's directing in Tenet is about control. Absolute control. Every scene is constructed with intention, every shot communicates information, and every choice serves the core idea of the film. Nothing feels accidental, nothing feels lazy, and nothing feels like it exists just to keep your attention span satisfied. Nolan directs like he knows exactly where the story is going and refuses to compromise to make it easier. Sword Art Online, on the other hand, feels like it's directed by impulse. Scenes exist because the plot needs to move, not because they're meaningfully staged. Action happens because action is expected. Emotional beats happen because the genre demands them. There's no visual discipline, no thematic cohesion in how scenes are framed or paced. It's functional at best and sloppy at worst. Tenet's directing uses motion, symmetry, and repetition as storytelling tools. Nolan blocks scenes so that movement itself explains the rules of the world. Forward and backward motion isn't just a gimmick, it's built into how scenes are staged. That takes planning, rehearsal, and confidence. You don't get that by accident. You get that from a director who understands film language at a deep level. Sword Art Online doesn't direct scenes, it just assembles them. Characters stand around explaining things. Fights are framed to look cool, not to communicate strategy or consequence. The camera doesn't tell a story, it just watches things happen. There's no trust in visuals to carry meaning, so the show constantly falls back on dialogue and narration to do the work instead. Nolan also understands pacing in a way Sword Art Online never does. Tenet moves fast because the idea demands it. The pressure never lets up, and that relentless momentum mirrors the theme of time itself. Sword Art Online drags constantly. Arcs bloat, tension evaporates, and scenes overstay their welcome because the direction doesn't know when to cut or how to escalate without repeating itself. Even Nolan's controversial choices, like overwhelming sound design or dense structure, are intentional. They put the audience in the same position as the characters, overloaded, disoriented, forced to focus. Sword Art Online plays it safe at every turn. It explains everything, repeats everything, and still manages to feel incoherent because the direction lacks confidence. Most importantly, Nolan directs with authority. He doesn't ask for permission. He doesn't chase trends. He doesn't dilute his ideas to make them universally digestible. Sword Art Online does the exact opposite. It panders constantly, afraid to lose viewers if it ever demands too much from them. That's the real difference. Tenet is directed by someone who believes in his vision and executes it without compromise. Sword Art Online is directed to be consumed, not remembered. One is cinema with intent. The other is content designed to go down easy and be forgotten just as fast. Additionally, let's take a look at some of the Easter eggs in Tenet, because this movie actually rewards attention instead of punishing it. One of the biggest Easter eggs is that the entire movie is basically a closed loop hiding in plain sight. The phrase, "what's happened," isn't just dialogue, it's the operating system of the entire story. Scenes you think are simple on first watch quietly set up payoffs hours later. Background details, character entrances, even the direction someone moves through a room often only make full sense once you realize you've already seen the consequences of those actions earlier in the film. The opera siege at the beginning is another massive one. On a first watch, it feels like a stylish cold open. On a second watch, you realize it's the movie telling you exactly how this world works from the very first scene. Characters you don't recognize yet are already involved. Events are already looping. The film straight up shows you the endgame before you even know what game you're playing. Even small visual choices act like Easter eggs. Inverted objects behaving strangely, people reacting before events fully register, fights that look awkward the first time but suddenly feel surgical once you understand both sides of the encounter. These aren't mistakes or weird quirks. They're deliberate clues Nolan plants early, knowing most viewers won't catch them until later. Now, the ending. The ending of Tenet doesn't wrap things up with a neat emotional bow, because that would betray the entire point. The final revelation isn't a twist designed to shock, it's a confirmation. You realize the protagonist has been shaping events the entire time, including recruiting the people helping him. The movie doesn't suddenly change direction at the end. It reveals that the direction was always locked in. The final battle works because it's not about who wins in the moment, it's about ensuring the loop stays intact. Victory isn't dramatic or celebratory. It's procedural. That's why it feels cold and controlled. The threat isn't defeated through passion or a last-second power-up, it's defeated through planning, coordination, and understanding the system better than the enemy. That's the most anti-Sword Art Online ending imaginable, and that's exactly why it works. Tenet ends the way it lives, confident, restrained, and uninterested in applause. And if Tenet gets you interested in time-based storytelling done right, there are other movies worth checking out that actually respect the concept instead of abusing it. Movies like Primer, which treats time travel like a technical problem instead of a fantasy gimmick. Predestination, which fully commits to the idea of causality eating itself. Arrival, which uses time perception to explore language and choice instead of cheap twists. Even Edge of Tomorrow, which takes a repetitive structure and actually builds character and tension through consequence. Notice the pattern. The good time-based movies all share discipline. Rules matter. Structure matters. Actions have consequences. None of them rely on a perfect protagonist bulldozing the story into submission. That's why Tenet belongs in that conversation, and Sword Art Online doesn't. One uses time as a storytelling weapon. The other uses it as set dressing for empty spectacle. Tenet challenges you, trusts you, and rewards you. SAO just wants you to clap, move on, and not think too hard about what you just watched.
After several delays, Christopher Nolan's newest movie, Tenet, is finally out. The film is really complex and confusing, especially the ending. So, if you need someone to clarify it for you, then you definitely came to the right place. To be honest, I didn't understand the movie after watching it the first time, but after several rewatches, I think I was able to get it. In this video, I'll explain the ending of Tenet. This video will contain spoilers for Tenet, so make sure you watch that movie first before watching this video. Anyways, let's get started. The protagonist meets up with Priya again in Oslo, which is actually before the time he met her in Mumbai. She tells him that in the future, a scientist similar to Oppenheimer invented a way to invert the entire entropy of the world by using 9 pieces of inversion technology. All combined, this piece of technology is called the algorithm. The scientist then sent the 9 pieces back into the past to prevent the algorithm from being used, and she took her own life so nobody else would know the location of the pieces. One of the pieces of the algorithm is the object from the car chase earlier in the movie. Priya told the protagonist to steal it because she knew he would fail and Sator would end up getting it. Now, Sator has all 9 pieces of the algorithm. The people in the future helped Sator find all the pieces of the algorithm, and they want him to activate it because they're about to face extinction due to climate change. There's no specific reason why the future humans chose Sator. He was simply in the right place at the right time. Lastly, Priya tells us that Tenet wasn't founded in the past, it will be founded in the future. The protagonist, Neil, and Kat then travel via a ship to a Soviet city where Sator has hidden the algorithm underground. We learn that Sator has a dead man switch, so if he's killed before the characters find the algorithm, then the location of the algorithm will be revealed to the future humans and they can use it to invert the entire world. Sator's death will activate the algorithm. In other words, the world will end when Sator dies. His dead man switch is believed to be the fitness tracker bracelet he wears on his wrist. Kat explains that Sator has pancreatic cancer and it's inoperable. He plans to and he believes that the world should also end with his death. If he can't have it, no one can. Sator will travel back in time to the point where he was the happiest, which is the vacation with Kat on the yacht in Vietnam. That happened 10 days ago on the 14th. Kat's job is to stop Sator from until the protagonist and Neil know that the algorithm is out of the dead drop. At the Soviet city, Ives splits everyone up into 2 teams, the red and blue teams. They'll be using a temporal pincer movement. The blue team is going to be inverted and will attack an hour later. This means the blue team members will be briefed by what the red team has done and vice versa. The temporal pincer movement is useful so that people in the future can give information to people in the past since they already know what happened. This is all a distraction though. The protagonist and Ives are part of a splinter team, and their real mission is to retrieve the algorithm themselves. Meanwhile, Kat has traveled back in time to the yacht in Vietnam, and she pretends to be her past self while interacting with the Sator from the future, which is the Sator we've been seeing throughout the movie. While this is happening, the protagonist and Ives make it to the hypercenter of the city, and they find a dead man from the blue team lying at the gate. Sator talks to the protagonist via a radio, and he says that his greatest sin was bringing a son into a world he knew was ending. Suddenly, the dead man from the blue team comes back to life and takes the bullet from Sator's man. It turns out he was inverted, and he opens the gate for the protagonist and Ives. They defeat Sator's man and retrieve the algorithm. Back on the yacht, Kat reveals who she truly is to Sator, and kills him with the silenced pistol. She throws Sator's body off the yacht, then dives into the water herself. Luckily, the protagonist and Ives make it out in time with the algorithm. The protagonist, Neil, and Ives break the algorithm up into 3 separate parts. They agree to hide each piece around the world, but nobody else can know the location. Neil then says it was him who opened the gate. He's the best lockpicker on the team, and he will always die there. Furthermore, we find out that Neil was recruited by the protagonist in the future, and they've known each other for years. Now it makes sense how Neil knew so much about the protagonist at the start of the movie. Finally, the last scene of the movie takes place in London. Kat is about to pick her son up from school, and Priya has hired an assassin to kill Kat in order to tie up some loose ends. However, the protagonist is there and kills Priya's assassin. He explains to Priya that a future version of himself himself is behind everything, and then he kills her. Afterwards, the protagonist says, "Mission accomplished." The movie ends with a shot of Kat and her son walking down the street. So, there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, we see how Neil has a red string on his backpack. This means that Neil was the one who saved the protagonist during the Opera House raid at the beginning of the movie. Moreover, one popular fan theory I've seen about Neil is that he could be an older version of Kat's son. Is this true? Maybe. Let's look at the clues we're given. Kat's son is named Max, which could be short for Maximilian, the full French spelling of that name. Since inversion is a big part of Tenet's plot, if you take the last 4 letters of Maximilian and read them backwards, it's Neil. This can't just be a simple coincidence. Additionally, Neil's hair is similar to Max's hair. Robert Pattinson's hair is not naturally blonde in real life, so he must have dyed it blonde for a reason. We find out that Neil has a physics degree, which means he had a good education. Well, Max goes to some fancy private school in London, so this fits with everything so far. The last few seconds of the movie is voiceover from Neil, and it plays over Kat and Max walking away, which further suggests a link between Neil and Max. The whole time inversion thing is quite difficult to understand as well, so I'll try to explain how it actually works. Basically, there's a machine called a turnstile, and you can invert the entropy of anyone or anything placed inside of it. A person who is inverted will move backwards, but everything else around them is still moving forwards in time. They can't even breathe the air, which is why they have to use oxygen masks. Furthermore, heat transfer for that person is inverted, so instead of fire, there will be ice, which is why the protagonist got hypothermia after the car explosion. The turnstiles in Tenet are based on a hypothesis in theoretical physics that was proposed by Richard Feynman and John Wheeler. To recap a little Physics 101, an electron is a particle that holds a negative charge, and a positron is its antimatter counterpart, a particle with the same mass as the electron that holds an equal but opposite positive charge. Electrons and positrons are mirror images of each other, and it's traditionally understood that they're two different types of subatomic particle. However, Feynman and Wheeler theorized that what we perceive as positrons are actually just electrons that have reached a point in time where they turn around and are now coming back the other way with their charge inverted. This could explain why electrons and positrons have the same exact mass. They're the same object. In addition, Tenet deals with the grandfather paradox. This is a time travel paradox where a person travels to the past and kills their own grandfather before their parents are born, which prevents that person from existing in the first place. So how does this work? In the movie, the protagonist asks Neil what the answer is, and Neil replies that there isn't one, but one solution to the grandfather paradox is alternative timelines. If you did go back into the past and kill your own grandfather, then there are now 2 separate timelines. One where the grandfather lives, your parents are born, and you were born to travel in time. Then there's another timeline where your grandfather dies, your parents were never born, but you can still exist in this particular timeline because it's not a closed loop. You just went from one timeline to another. This is what happens in Tenet. The future humans believe it's possible to destroy the past while changing the future and creating a different timeline. They're desperate enough to try it because they have nothing to lose. If you've seen any time travel movies before, you'll know that the people time traveling can't interact with their past selves, or else it could dramatically impact and change the future. The same is true for Tenet. If an inverted person comes into physical contact with their past self, it could cause both versions of that person to be annihilated. That's why the inverted people have to wear special protective gear. The Sator Square plays a big part in Tenet. Sator is the main antagonist of the movie. Arepo is the name of the artist where Kat got the fake painting from. Tenet is the name of the organization and the title of the movie. Opera is the place where the movie begins. Lastly, Rotas is the name of the shipping company. Also, Tenet is 10 forwards and backwards. At the end of the movie, we saw how the red and blue teams each had 10 minutes to complete their mission. As with all big blockbusters, the main question is, will there be a sequel? Well, Christopher Nolan doesn't usually make sequels to his movies outside of the Dark Knight trilogy, so he's probably not going to make a sequel to Tenet either. Christopher Nolan actually came up with the idea for Tenet over 20 years ago, and he worked on the script for about 6 to 7 years. If a sequel to Tenet does end up happening, I think it would be cool to explore more of the protagonist and Neil's relationship and see them go on their other missions together. What did you think of Tenet? Let me know your opinion in the comments below. I personally had mixed feelings overall. It was certainly ambitious, but a lot of things were hard to understand on the first viewing. Moreover, the sound mixing wasn't that great, and it was difficult to hear the dialogue during certain parts of the movie. The action scenes were pretty exciting and entertaining to watch though. It's not exactly my favorite Christopher Nolan movie, but I respect and appreciate what he was trying to do. Well, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a future upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Christopher Nolan's newest movie, Tenet, is finally being released. The film is filled with Easter eggs, references, and other hidden details that you might not have noticed. If you want to know about some of these, then you definitely came to the right place, because I'll explain all the ones I found in the movie. This video will contain spoilers for Tenet, so make sure you watch that movie first before watching this video. Anyways, let's get started. Number 1. Logos. There's a red Warner Brothers logo and a blue Syncope logo at the beginning of the movie. In Tenet, the color red is used to show that time is moving normally, and the color blue is used to show that time is inverted. The red and blue color symbolism is based on the Doppler shift. Basically, when an object moves away from you, the light has a longer wavelength, so it's a red shift. On the contrary, when an object is coming towards you, the light has a shorter wavelength, so it's a blue shift. Number 2. Opening. Tenet's opening scene is a raid at an opera house in Kyiv, Ukraine. This seems to be based on a real-life event that happened in October 2002 called the Moscow Theater Hostage Crisis. 40 to 50 armed Chechens held over 850 people hostage at the Dubrovka Theater. The actual scene in the movie was shot in real life in Tallinn, Estonia, at a venue called Linna Hall, which was built for the 1980 Moscow Olympics. The building was abandoned for the past 10 years, so the production team had to rebuild a lot of it for the movie. Number 3. Twilight. The protagonist's first line in the movie is, "We live in a Twilight world." Robert Pattinson, who plays Neil, is best known for his role as Edward Cullen in the 5 Twilight movies. Number 4. Maxwell's Demon. On the whiteboard in Laura's room, you can see a drawing of Maxwell's Demon. This is a thought experiment created in 1867 by physicist James Clerk Maxwell. In the thought experiment, he suggested a way on how the second law of thermodynamics could be violated. The second law of thermodynamics states that the total entropy of an isolated system can't be decreased over time. Maxwell's demon thought experiment is about a demon who controls a small door between 2 chambers of gas. The demon opens and shuts the door as individual gas molecules approach it. This means that only the fast molecules are able to pass into one gas chamber, and the slower molecules are passed into the other gas chamber. Since the faster molecules are hotter, this causes one of the chambers to warm up and the other chamber to cool down. In other words, this decreases the entropy of the gas molecules, which should violate the second law of thermodynamics. Number 5. The Matrix. After Laura tells the protagonist how the time inversion works, his response is, "Whoa, this is exactly what Neo said in The Matrix." Number 6. Christopher Hitchens. Robert Pattinson's accent and mannerisms in the movie is based on Christopher Hitchens, an English-American journalist and author. Additionally, Robert Pattinson explained that he never uses his real accent when he plays British characters in movies. He feels that it's too fake and he's just playing himself on screen, so he wants to do something different. Number 7. Jeremy Theobald. British actor Jeremy Theobald plays Stuart in Tenet, who seems to be Sir Michael Crosby's assistant. He also played the main character in the 1998 movie Following, which was Christopher Nolan's first film. Moreover, Jeremy Theobald has appeared in another Christopher Nolan movie, Batman Begins. He played a Gotham waterboard technician. Number 8. The Night Manager. In Tenet, Elizabeth Debicki plays Kat. Her role is very similar to another character she played, called Jed Marshall on the British TV series The Night Manager. In both Tenet and The Night Manager, Elizabeth Debicki's character is in an abusive relationship with someone who she doesn't even love. Furthermore, the men she's married to are arms dealers, and she doesn't leave the relationship because she'll lose her son in the process. The role of Kat was originally written for someone much older than Elizabeth Debicki, but Christopher Nolan's wife and producing partner Emma Thomas really enjoyed Elizabeth Debicki's performance in the movie Widows. Christopher Nolan then rewrote the part of Kat specifically for Elizabeth Debicki. Elizabeth Debicki wanted to audition for her role, but she didn't have to because Christopher Nolan offered her the part without an audition. Number 9. Akane Kashiwazaki. You can see that this newspaper article was written by someone named Akane Kashiwazaki. According to IMDb, Akane Kashiwazaki was the second assistant accountant for Tenet. Coincidentally, Akane Kashiwazaki is the name of a character from the anime series Run with the Wind. Number 10. Jack Ryan. Shadow Recruit. In Tenet, Kenneth Branagh plays an evil Russian man who wants the world to end with his death. This is similar to his role in the 2014 movie Jack Ryan, Shadow Recruit. In that movie, Kenneth Branagh played the main antagonist, Viktor Sharivin. He was also an evil Russian man who wanted to cripple the world's economy by launching a massive assault. Number 11. The Joker. Andre and Kat get into an argument and Andre says, "Look at me and understand. You don't negotiate with a tiger." This is similar to a scene in Christopher Nolan's other movie, The Dark Knight. The Joker says, "Look at me," to a guy in the video. Number 12. Batman. There's a scene where the protagonist shoves Neil against a wall. This is very similar to the scene of Batman interrogating the Joker in The Dark Knight. Batman shoves the Joker against the wall in a similar way. Number 13. To Live and Die in LA. Christopher Nolan said that the car chase sequence in Tenet is inspired by the 1985 movie To Live and Die in LA. Specifically, the way that the camera sits with the characters and then takes the audience through the chase as well. No visual effects were used for the car chase sequence. A stunt team of drivers from around the world worked on this scene, including stunt driver Jim Wilkie, who worked on The Dark Knight. He was the one who played Joker's truck driver and did the truck flip stunt. Number 14. Quote, "When the characters are traveling on the ship, you can see a sign on the wall that says ships in harbor are safe, but that's not what ships are built for." This is based on a quote by American author and professor John Augustus Shedd. It's from his 1928 book, Salt from My Attic. The quote pretty much means that it's better to go out and do the things you always wanted to do, rather than sit around and do nothing. Don't be afraid to take risks. Even if you're unsuccessful, you'll know that you at least tried, and you learned something valuable in the process. Towards the end of the movie, we find out that the protagonist was the one who founded Tenet. This wouldn't have happened if he just sat around and didn't do anything. Number 15. 10 minutes. During the final action scene, we see that the red team and blue team have exactly 10 minutes to complete their mission and retrieve the algorithm. The word Tenet is 10 forwards and backwards, so 10 minutes is a very fitting amount of time for the final mission. One team is moving forwards in time, while the other team is moving backwards in time. If you listen closely, you can hear that the movie score reverses during certain parts to match the scenes. Also, the watches worn by the red and blue teams are Hamilton watches that were specifically made for the movie. You can buy real versions of these watches, but they cost over $2,000. Additionally, Tenet's original movie logo with the backwards ENT had to be changed because it was too similar to the logo of a bike company called Tenet. Number 16. Fake pill. Andre Sader plans to commit by taking a pill he got from the CIA. It's the exact same pill the protagonist took at the beginning of the movie. However, we already saw that these pills don't work properly and won't kill the person who takes them. In other words, Sader's wouldn't have been successful, so the algorithm wouldn't have activated either since he didn't die. Number 17. Interstellar. In the movie, we find out that humans from the future are about to go extinct due to climate change and global warming. That's why they want Andre Sader to activate the algorithm. Christopher Nolan's other movie, Interstellar, also features people from the future. In Interstellar, future humans built the huge Tesseract, and Cooper was able to communicate with Murph by using the watch he gave her. Could these be the same future humans in both Tenet and Interstellar? Probably not, since the people in Interstellar had to leave the Earth due to crop blights and dust storms. So, unless they're dealing with climate change and global warming on other planets too, it's not likely that they're the same exact people, and the Earth is already destroyed and uninhabitable in Interstellar, so they don't need Andre Sader to do anything about it. Number 18. The Red String of Fate. Neil has a distinct red string on his backpack. I'm thinking that is a reference to the red string of fate. This is an East Asian belief that originates from Chinese mythology. The red string of fate is an invisible red cord around the finger of those who are destined to meet one another since they're true lovers. While the protagonist and Neil aren't soulmates or lovers, they are destined to always meet each other. As we learned in the movie, it was actually a future version of the protagonist who recruited Neil to join Tenet. They've known each other for many years, and they've had a long and beautiful friendship together. This is only the beginning for the protagonist. Number 19. Sader Square. The Sader Square is a word square that contains a 5-word Latin palindrome. The 5 words are Sader, Aripo, Tenet, Opera, and Rhodas. Altogether, one translation of these words is, the farmer Aripo uses a plow as his form of work. Moreover, each of these 5 words plays a big part in Tenet. Sader is the last name of the main antagonist, Andre Sader. Aripo is the last name of the Spanish painter, Thomas Aripo. Tenet is the title of the movie and the name of the secret organization. Opera is the place where the first scene of the movie is set. Lastly, Rhodas is the name of Andre Sader's company. Furthermore, the oldest representation of the Sader Square was found in Pompeii. There was a reference to this in the movie. Kat says that she will take Max to visit Pompeii. Number 20. James Bond. Christopher Nolan is a huge fan of the James Bond movies, and those movies heavily inspired Tenet. But Christopher Nolan didn't watch any James Bond movies while working on Tenet because he wanted to make something unique. He wasn't just trying to do his own version of a James Bond movie. And that's it for this list. Did you find any more Easter eggs, references, or hidden details that I didn't mention in the video? If so, be sure to tell me in the comments below. Also, what did you think of Tenet? Let me know your opinion. I personally thought it was decent. The movie had a few problems and flaws, but overall, it was pretty entertaining. Well, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a future upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
We don't really know too much about Christopher Nolan's upcoming movie Tenet. It has to do with time inversion and stopping World War III, but apart from that, not much else has been revealed. We're not even sure what most of the main characters' names are. What will Tenet be about? Well, I have a few theories. In this video, let's take a look at 5 things that might happen in Tenet. Number 1, Inception sequel. Tenet might be a secret sequel to Inception. Sure, it sounds crazy, but this kind of thing has been done before. For instance, Split was actually a sequel to Unbreakable. I don't think anyone predicted that to happen, yet it turned out to be true. So it's possible that Tenet and Inception share a much deeper link. Christopher Nolan said that he conceived the idea for Tenet over 20 years ago, which would have been the early 2000s. This is important because Christopher Nolan said that he worked on Inception's script for 9 to 10 years. Inception came out in 2010, so this means that Christopher Nolan started writing Inception in the early 2000s as well. In other words, Christopher Nolan came up with the idea for both Inception and Tenet at around the same time, and he started working on the script for both movies at around the same time. This is even more proof to confirm that Tenet is most likely a sequel to Inception. Furthermore, Michael Caine is in Tenet and Inception. It's possible that he's playing the same exact character. As mentioned at the beginning, we don't know what most of the characters' names are. Maybe this was done on purpose to avoid spoilers. If the filmmakers revealed that Michael Caine was playing Professor Stephen Miles, his character's name in Inception, then it would have given everything away. Moreover, John David Washington has confirmed that Tenet is somewhat connected to Inception. Here's what he said in an interview with Esquire. "I'd say Tenet is an in-law to Inception. They're related by marriage. They get together for Thanksgivings, family barbecues, like that kind of thing. Other than that, one lives in Europe, the other one lives in Compton." Number 2, cloning. If you take a look at some of Tenet's movie posters, you can see that John David Washington appears 2 times on them. Maybe the reason for this is due to cloning. Remember, cloning was a big part of the story in Christopher Nolan's other movie, The Prestige. Hugh Jackman's character, Robert Angier, would make copies of himself while the original drowned in a water tank beneath the stage. Perhaps this cloning will be part of Tenet's story as well. In the trailer for Tenet, you can clearly see that John David Washington's character dies instead of giving up his colleagues. His death could be permanent, and the other John David Washingtons we see in the movie are actually clones of the original. Number 3, identical twins. In the previous point, I talked about how cloning was a big part of Christopher Nolan's other movie, The Prestige. Another surprise in that movie was that Christian Bale's character, Alfred Borden, had an identical twin brother. This could be the reason why we see 2 John David Washingtons on the Tenet poster. It's him and his identical twin brother. The Prestige was all about hiding in plain sight, and Christopher Nolan likes to reuse similar themes in his movies. Therefore, the same is possibly true here, and the answer was right under our noses this entire time. As stated before, Split was a secret sequel to Unbreakable. The big twist was revealed on the movie posters, the cracked glass lines up on both posters. Number 4, secret role. Do you remember Christopher Nolan's other movie Interstellar? Matt Damon's role as Dr. Mann in Interstellar was very unexpected. He wasn't part of the marketing and nobody anticipated him to be in the movie. We could see the same thing happen in Tenet. As stated before, Tenet might be a secret sequel to Inception. It would be pretty awesome if some of the characters from Inception, like Dom Cobb or Arthur, appeared in Tenet. Number 5, the real villain. Aaron Taylor Johnson only briefly appears in the second trailer for Tenet, but he's going to play a big role in the movie because Christopher Nolan said so himself. In an interview with Entertainment Weekly, Christopher Nolan was asked about Aaron Taylor Johnson's involvement in the movie. Here's what he said. "Aaron Taylor Johnson is indeed in the film. He's an important part of the film. Yes, there are no photographs of him. This is true. He is briefly glimpsed in the second trailer. He's also completely unrecognizable. There are all kinds of things that happen in terms of where the story goes as the film develops and where it winds up in the later stages that we don't want to spoil for people. Based on this comment, it's possible the big twist is that Aaron Taylor Johnson will be the true villain of the movie, not Kenneth Branagh's character. Being the main antagonist is definitely an important role. Christopher Nolan has done this bait and switch thing before in Batman Begins. Ken Watanabe played a fake Ra's al Ghul, then it was later revealed that Liam Neeson's character Henry Ducard was the real Ra's al Ghul. And that's it for this list. What do you think about any of these theories? Do you agree with what I said? Why or why not? Let me know your opinion in the comments below. Also, do you have any theories of your own? If so, be sure to tell me. Well, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a future upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Christopher Nolan doesn't usually make sequels to his original movies, but while Tenet is a great standalone story, it does leave a lot of room for many sequel opportunities. If Christopher Nolan decides to make a sequel to Tenet, then I have a few ideas on what the film could be about. In this video, let's take a look at 5 things that might happen in Tenet 2. But fair warning, this video will contain spoilers for the first Tenet movie, so make sure you watch that movie first before watching this video. That being said, let's get started. Number 1, more missions. Tenet is pretty much Christopher Nolan's version of a James Bond movie, and as we've seen over the course of 20 or more James Bond movies, there's always another mission. Therefore, it's possible a Tenet sequel could follow the protagonist and Neil as they embark on another mission to save the world. At the end of Tenet, Neil explains that he's known the protagonist for several years and that this is only the beginning. Despite knowing that Neil will eventually die in the end, it would be fascinating to see Neil and the protagonist go on many more exciting globe-trotting adventures before the inevitable demise. Because after all, it's about the journey, not the destination. Number 2, future humans. Andrei Sator was the main antagonist of Tenet, but it's clear he wasn't acting alone. He was being helped by mysterious people from the future who needed Andrei to activate the algorithm in a desperate last chance attempt to save themselves from extinction due to global warming. In theory, they believed changing the past would somehow alter the future and thus save them. A possible Tenet sequel could take place centuries after the first movie with a focus on these future humans. On top of that, the origin and creation of the time inversion technology would be a fascinating theme to unpack. Moreover, in Tenet, Priya tells the protagonist that a female scientist in the future built the algorithm. It would be interesting to find out exactly how this happened. I'm thinking that the scientists in the future were trying to find a way to reverse the effects of climate change and global warming, but instead, they accidentally discovered a method to reverse the entropy of objects and people. And you'd be surprised, but a lot of things throughout history were invented by accident. For example, the microwave oven, superglue, potato chips, chewing gum, matches, safety glass, and penicillin, to name a few. Number 3, Neil is Max. One popular fan theory about Tenet is that Neil is an older version of Kat's son, Max, and there's quite a lot of evidence to suggest this theory. First of all, Neil told the protagonist that he has a master's in physics, which reveals that he had a good education growing up, similar to how Max has been shown attending prestigious private schools in London. Secondly, Neil and Max both have similar hairstyles and hair color. In real life, Robert Pattinson's hair isn't naturally blonde, it's dark brown. Therefore, he must have dyed his hair blonde on purpose solely for the movie. The only logical reason I can think of is that Christopher Nolan wanted Robert Pattinson's hair to match Laurie Shepard's, the young child actor who plays Max. Third, the name Max might be short for the French variation Maximilian. Take note of the last 4 letters of this name being L-I-E-N. Invert it and we have Neil. Now, that's way too on the nose to just be a simple coincidence considering inversion is a big part of Tenet's story. Furthermore, Neil might not even be the character's real name. In an interview with Pink Villa, Christopher Nolan revealed that Robert Pattinson's character could be called Neil, but no one ever knows for sure, as the character could have multiple identities. In other words, Neil is most likely not the real name of Robert Pattinson's character in the movie, but rather a code name or a false identity, bringing up the theory that Max could possibly be his real name. Hopefully with a sequel, Christopher Nolan can confirm if this theory rings true or not. Number 4, the forming of Tenet. In the movie, we learn that Tenet wasn't founded in the past, but will be founded in the future and by a future version of the protagonist himself. I'm eager to find out more about the Tenet organization. Who else is a part of it? Did the protagonist form Tenet on his own or with the help of other people? What else is Tenet responsible for? There's a lot of ways for Christopher Nolan to expand on this in a sequel. Number 5, finding the algorithm. At the end of the movie, Ives splits the algorithm up into 3 different parts. He keeps one part and gives the other 2 parts to the protagonist and Neil. The characters vow to hide the parts somewhere no one will ever find them. Later, Neil gives his part to the protagonist, which means that the protagonist now has 2/3 of the algorithm. But why didn't they just destroy the algorithm altogether and ensure nobody would ever discover discover or abuse its power? Well, Christopher Nolan might have preserved the algorithm to continue this story thread in a sequel, with a potential new evil group finding the algorithm and leaving it up to the protagonist, Neil, and the other members of Tenet to stop them. And that's it for this list. What do you think about these theories? Do you agree with what I said? Why or why not? Let me know your opinions in the comments below. Do you have any Tenet sequel theories of your own? If so, be sure to tell me. How did you feel about Tenet? I personally thought it was decent, though the story is a bit difficult to understand at times, but overall, it was a very entertaining movie. Well, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a future upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Palm Springs is a 2020 American romantic comedy movie. If you're unsure about the ending, then you definitely came to the right place. In this video, I'll explain the ending of Palm Springs. We see that Sarah has been studying quantum physics, and she finds a way to escape the time loop. As long as they blow themselves up within the 3.2 second window it takes to reset the day, then they'll be fine. However, Niles is used to this lifestyle, and says that he doesn't want to leave. Sarah understands and goes to blow herself up alone, but later on, Niles decides to leave with Sarah. Even if the plan doesn't work and they both die, Niles would rather die with Sarah than live without her in the time loop. Sarah blows herself and Niles up, and we see that the plan seemingly worked. It's the next day, November 10th. In the post-credit scene, Roy meets Niles at the wedding, but Niles doesn't recognize Roy. This means that Roy knows the plan worked. So what does this all mean? Well, first of all, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Roy scene is clearly a plot hole. If the plan worked, then Niles and Sarah shouldn't be there anymore. Just like how Sarah blew the goat up and the goat wasn't there anymore. Anyways, there's actually a bunch of different interpretations for the ending of this movie. Andy Ciara said that they shot a bunch of different endings in the pool, and it's up to the audience to decide what is the most emotionally satisfying ending for them. Even the cast and crew of the movie disagree on what happened to Niles and Sarah in the end. The widely accepted ending is that Niles and Sarah did make it out of the time loop, and it's the next day after the wedding. Furthermore, you can see dinosaurs at the end as well, which is a callback to the one scene where Niles and Sarah were tripping out in the desert. What does this mean? Luckily, we get a definitive answer from Andy Ciara, who's a huge fan of Jurassic Park. Here's what he said.
The dinosaur moment. I could say that you have two characters who don't believe they are capable of love. And in that moment, maybe they fall in love. Dinosaurs don't exist, but in that moment, they exist. It's two things that are impossible. Or, I can also just say that I love Jurassic Park and I wanted to put that in there. It felt right in that moment. How do we make this scene stand out more? What better way than to add dinosaurs?
Another popular fan theory about this movie is that Nana might actually be an older version of Sarah, or she knows about the time loop as well. She said that she's been to many weddings before. Additionally, when Sarah was about to leave the time loop, Nana seemed to know what's going to happen. If Sarah can get out of the time loop, maybe she can also find a way to get back into the time loop as well. And she did that when she got old to prevent herself from dying. Kristen Milioti, the actress who plays Sarah, was asked about this exact topic and what Nana meant when she said her line. Here's what she said.
First of all, June Squibb is incredible. June Squibb is the best. She brings such a gravitas to everything she does, but with a light touch, if that makes sense. I was always so moved by that line because that can be interpreted in so many different ways. There is a touch of mysticism to it. I am very into anything that's remotely witchy. There's definitely a weird dose of mysticism that's like, oh my god, does she know? But you could also interpret that in the real world too, the quote-unquote real world. I guess you'll be on your journey now toward healing.
So how long was Niles in the time loop for? Well, the movie never mentioned an exact amount of time, but it was long enough for Niles to completely forget about his past life. Andy Ciara explained that Niles was stuck in the time loop for about 40 years. I think that Palm Springs actually pairs up nicely with another movie that was coincidentally released on the same day, The Old Guard. Both movies deal with the concept of living forever, albeit under very different circumstances, and they show that it's better to live in eternity with someone else rather than alone. What did you think of Palm Springs? Let me know your opinion in the comments below. I personally thought it was pretty good. I liked the chemistry between the two lead actors, and the movie was very enjoyable to watch overall. Well, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a future upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.